So I'm sitting here with Stephen, and we're going to discuss the Bhagavad Gita. And maybe a good starting point is just to give like a short 1 or 2 minute overview of who Stephen is and his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, and where he acquired his knowledge around the Bhagavad Gita. So, hello, Stephen.
Hi, Brian.
So, what was your introduction to the Bhagavad Gita? How did it land in your life?
I was on my first trip to India in 1978. I was a young man of 22, and I checked into this hotel in the mountains that was next door to an ashram. And I didn't know what an ashram was or anything really much about Hinduism or gurus or anything. But there was a guru there and there was an ashram, and so I went to check it out. I'd heard of meditation. I vaguely thought that it was good for you and it would be something worth investigating. And I went and started meditating with the people and the guru at the ashram. And one of the books they recommended was the Bhagavad Gita. So I got a copy and started reading it. And it held my attention pretty well. It seems to be a universal description of the human condition. So I kind of picked that up pretty quickly and was interested in the subject matter and was able to work my way through it. So yeah, that was my introduction.
So, we're introducing the Bhagavad Gita to the students, and it's probably the first time that they've ever been introduced to it. So we want to do a fairly good overview so that they understand it, more or less. You can drill down into places where you find it rather interesting and that there's material that's impacted you. It's 18 chapters. It's a lifetime of work, so there's no expectation that we do the whole thing justice in one sitting. So that's not the expectation.
Yeah.
But being able to give a pretty good overview and maybe how it's impacted you and just virtually anywhere you want to go with it and just having it flow will be absolutely perfect.
Okay, so what do you actually know about it right now? What is your picture of the Gita? What comes to mind when I say to you Bhagavad Gita?
Okay, well for me is that a few directions on it. I'm familiar with some of the stories. There's so many stories, and there's so many interpretations in the stories.
Yeah.
I get lost in the number of stories and the numbers of characters, and then the interpretations that are with them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge body of work.
Right.
In the like everything from Shiva to Shiva's wife to Arjuna and Krishna in the beginning of the story,
Yeah.
and then and that like my vague overview would be that Krishna, which is virtually your higher self, or an interesting fact is that Carl Jung read the Bhagavad Gita and virtually called it, well, it's a conversation between self and the higher self, and his words would be the superconscious, which I don't use, but higher self, works for me. And that there's really a look at the human condition and told through stories and mythology. A lot of people believe it's mythology and it's the lessons are in the stories, and a lot of people believe that what happened, and they're describing off-planet situations and gods and demigods and people with powers is all real and all true. So that's my experience of it. So I can't really drill down too much into the stories other than the first one with the chariot and Arjuna, but even limited in that view as well.
Okay, so you know that the Gita is part of a larger body of work?
Yes.
Right.
The story of India.
Very good. The Mahabharata.
That's it.
Right. Bharat is the other word for India. You're correct.
Ah, okay.
The Mahabharata is the great epic of India.
Yes.
So that was set around the kingdom of Hastinapur, which is modern day New Delhi. That's where all this took place, in that region. Um, and it has to do with the royal lineage at a time in history which the date is very unclear, because Hindus are notoriously loose and fast with dates. Sometimes you hear 2000 BC, sometimes you hear 3000, sometimes 5000.
200,000?
Well, you know, the other thing is that none of this took place on Earth. That it all took place in a celestial realm, um, parallel to Earth, or you know.
So the year really doesn't matter.
The year doesn't matter. The time intervals doesn't. You can't really get them right. Now, while I was preparing for this conversation, I went back and looked at something that was fantastic, just like getting back into the whole story, and wow, this leads to that, leads to that, leads to that. And it just occurred to me that as there are 72,000 channels of energy in this body, so there are like all these different characters in the Gita, and each one is not really necessarily human, but perhaps representing one of these channels of energy. So the description, the overall description that the Gita is giving is one of the cosmic view of the body, or the cosmic body. So
Just for a point of clarity, when you're talking about the 72,000 channels and the body, you're talking about the human body.
yes,
And that there's channels within the human body, and then you're pointing to that there's a microcosm and a macrocosm.
that's right.
That there's a relationship between all the characters and all these channels of the human beings, and there's specifics. There's very specific. Like with Ganesh, is about going through objects. What it is a intention.
Yeah.
So each one of these, that as an example, that
Right.
each one of these channels or these characters probably represents some kind of intention.
An intention, right? Yes, or a quality. And so I read this interesting thing, which said that the Gita, the Mahabharata, which is the story which the Gita is placed in, when that was finished, it initiated the beginning of Kali Yuga. Now, according to Hindu cosmology, an epoch, or a kalpa, which means the complete cycle of creation and dissolution, is made up of 4 yugas. The first yuga is called Satya Yuga, and that's where everyone was beings of truth and light and honor, and there was tons of abundance for everyone, and everyone lived super long, thousands of years, and that lasted for a long time on Earth. They say 4,000 celestial years, which is about 4 million Earth years. And then the next yuga, 1/4 of the splendor and the glory of that was lost. Things started to dissipate, deteriorate.
Entropy.
Entropy, right. So 1/4 of that got lost, and the yuga was only 3/4 as long. So it was 3,000 years, celestial years. And then the next one, half what was left was gone. And then the one after that, which is Kali Yuga, only 1/4 of the original knowledge of a human being is supposed to have as a perfected, enlightened being, with whole being, was gone. So literally, mankind as a species couldn't access 3/4 of his potential in the final yuga, which only lasted 1,000 celestial years, which is still 400,000 Earth years.
Okay.
So now, if this all took place, if the end of the Mahabharata, which supposedly took place at the most 5,000 years ago, was the beginning of Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga lasts 400,000 years, then it's going way too fast.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
So now these yugas are also representative of the physical bodies. In yogic philosophy, the body is made up of 5 sheaths. One is called the Annamaya Kosh, which is the physical body made out of earth. One is called the Pranmaya Kosh, which is the breath body, which is corresponds to water, strangely enough. And then the and then the Pranmaya Kosh, Annamaya Kosh, Pranmaya Kosh. What was the third? The oh God, it's slipping my mind. Anyway, the next one corresponds to the no, sorry, fire. The pran corresponds to the fire, and then the pranmaya kosh, and then the manomaya kosh, which is the mind. That corresponds to air, and then the anandamaya kosh, which is the space, corresponds to bliss. So that's the bliss body. So you have your bliss body as the finest body, the manomaya kosh, which is the mental body, and the pranmaya kosh, which is the breath body.
So just about the sheaths is that there's one sheath into another, is my understanding, and there's like the gross experience is more of the first one, is the earth, and the most refined is the bliss body.
Yeah, that's right. And so as the first yuga passed, the awareness of that bliss body was also passed. With the next yuga passing, the loss of the mental body and whichever one I'm forgetting goes. And with the third one, the other two go. And so when you're left in Kali Yuga, in the last yuga, all we have is body consciousness. Yes. This is why body consciousness is so important, because of the deterioration of our perception.
Yes.
So now all we care about is how we look and how much money we have.
Surface.
Surface level, physical level, body level.
That's fascinating. I never actually had those associated with yugas before.
No.
So that's great. That's the first piece I've never heard before. So that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, the story of the Mahabharata is a story of a family divided. There were two uncles. They were both kings. One was named Pandu. He was the father of our heroes, the 5 Pandavas. And the other's name was Dhritarashtra. Very hard to say. He was blind. And he was the father of Duryodhana and his clan, who were called the Kauravas. And they were really nasty. They were like mean as kids. They would fight with their cousins, the Pandavas, and the Pandavas were all righteous, and the Kauravas were all bullies and dirty tricks and all kinds of things from the beginning, because this is their nature. So we're talking about, in the Gita, we're talking about the higher mind versus the lower mind. So the Pandavas represent the higher mind, and the Kauravas represent the lower mind.
Okay.
Okay.
And when you mentioned the heroes, so they were more righteous driven people, and the other ones were more ego based?
Yes.
Or were they both ego based? Or to degrees?
Well, you would have to say that it's more about honor or righteousness.
Yes.
What is righteousness? So whether someone is ego, but you could be an ego-based righteous person as well.
Yes.
You know, so
but they had
that's
integrity.
Up to the individual. Well, both sides actually had integrity. Like the Kauravas were very educated. They were very advanced in learning. They really treated each other very well. They had a lot of good qualities. They just had this unbounded greed and unreasonable hatred and this love of war and
I'm definitely calling that ego based. They had their positive traits, but they were ego driven.
Yes. That's why their father was the blind king, right?
Yes.
He couldn't see. Right?
Yes.
So, and they couldn't see either, right?
Great analogy. Yes.
Yeah. So this whole enmity occurred between these two sides of the family. but were really just the war between the higher mind and the lower mind. Now, there were 5 Pandav brothers. Interestingly, there are 5 senses. There are 5 sheaths of the body. There are 5 elements. So each of these, you can see, and plus, they were all married to one woman, which people say, oh, polyandry. But it's actually not. It was 5 elements married to one Shakti, married to one power. It's the same power that drives
all the brothers were
elements.
married to one woman.
Yes.
Ah, I thought that each one of them had one wife, but they were married to one woman.
They were all married to the same woman.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's a long story how that came about.
Yes. Okay. we can't tell all the details.
No, there's so many stories.
I
mean, the Mahabharata has been described as just a bunch of chaos by scholars, just because it's been patched together, and then no one knows who wrote what and who added what. Largely, it was spoken, so you could even imagine how broken telephonish it got at times. Okay. The Pandavas, they're the 5 elements, united by the one Shakti, their single wife. And they are at war with the Kauravas. Why are they at war? Because, first I wanted to tell you about the birth of the Pandavas, because it's quite important actually. Their father, Pandu, had a curse on him, that because he was hunting as a young man and he saw 2 deer in the bushes, and he didn't realize that they were mating at the time, but he shot them both, and it turns out that they weren't deer at all. They were a sage and his wife. And when he went over to him, he didn't show proper remorse, and as if it was his right to hunt as the king of the place. And so the sage cursed him and said, the next time you make love, you're going to die. So this king was already married. He had 2 wives, but no children as yet. And he was really dejected because he needed children. He wanted offspring. He wanted a son. He wanted someone to run the kingdom. And his first wife said, well, actually, I have this boon from a sage who I served for a number of years when I was a girl. And he said that whenever I wanted, I can call down a god and he would impregnate me, and I could have a child by the god. And so the king said, really? He said, okay, do that. Let's have some children by the gods. And so the first god that she called down was Dharma. Dharma means righteousness. It means the right way of doing things. It means all lofty, noble ideals. So that Dharma was the father of the first son of Yudhishthira, the oldest. And then she called down the wind god, and the wind god became the father of Bhim, the second son. He was super powerful. He was the strongest of all, the physically strongest of all of them. And then she called down Indra, who was the god of heaven, and so he was like the chief of the celestial realm. And he became Arjun, who was the foremost warrior of them all. He was the most skilled at combat. And then for the last one, she called down, the last one, she taught the mantra to the other co-wife. And she called down the twin physicians, Ashwinis. And so twins were born with healing powers. So that's the parentage of these 5 heroes of our story.
Wow. That's a good start.
It really is, and it's actually just scratching the surface. There's so much more to back it up with. But anyways, so you get an idea, these heroes were basically demigods. And I was trying to see what was that leading to.
We were talking about you wanted to talk about the creation of the family before you got to
Right.
the war.
Right. So now the mother who had the boon to call down all these gods, when she got that boon, she didn't wait till she was married. She wanted to try it out as a young girl. She was just a teenager, and so she said, "Oh, okay, I'm calling the sun." So the sun appears, and then she goes, "Oh my God! Actually, I didn't really think it was going to happen, and I don't think you should do this. I'm not married, and it's not right, and please spare me." And the sun god said, "Well, look, I can't just come here for nothing, because what'll all the other gods say? So you're going to have a child with me." And he goes, "But what I can do is, after you give birth, you will once again be a virgin." Which is quite interesting in a biblical sense. So there was a virgin birth in the Mahabharata as well.
Wow.
And then when the son was born, she was too ashamed to bring it anywhere and show it to anyone, so she put it in a basket and set it out in the river, like Moses, strangely enough. So that son was found by some villagers and brought up, and he became one of the major antagonists in the Mahabharata. He hated the Pandavas for something, he never knew why, but he just had this incredible bitterness towards the Pandavas, and he was the son of the son. So, which is also interesting biblically. So, his name was Karna, and was a he was an exalted character. He had a lot of amazing qualities that made him like superior amongst men, and he was an incredible fighter and everything. But he just had one flaw, which was his hatred for the Pandavas. So he became friends with Duryodhan, who was the chief of the Kauravas, and Duryodhan made him a king of his own place so that he was worthy to fight with the Pandavas, because only royalty could fight with royalty. Back in those days, they still had wars, but they seemed to have some rules to them. I don't know if that made it any better. I don't think so. It was like, okay, so then there's this rogue Pandav who was on the Kaurav side, and a very powerful warrior. So the Kauravas had a lot of Jews as well. They also were all taught by the same gurus as children, these cousins. They were taught archery, they were taught charioteering, they were taught the use of all kinds of weapons, and also philosophies and meditation. They were any of them could expound on philosophy like masters, because they were very, very well trained and they had great education. So, and they loved their teachers. They loved their archery teacher, who was Drone. So these teachers, when it came time for war, I have to tell you why the war started. Okay, so these 5 heroes grow up, the 5 Pandavas grow up, and the Kauravas grow up. They're battling constantly, like kids do, and then when they get mature, the Kauravas challenge the Pandavas to a game of dice, because they know Yudhishthir, who was actually the incarnation of Dharma and righteousness, but he had a weakness for gambling. Figure that out.
That's interesting.
So they got into this dice game, and it was rigged, and Yudhishthir didn't know when to quit at all. He lost the entire kingdom plus their wife to the bad guys.
Oops.
And these things happen.
They do.
So a judge stepped in and said, okay, enough. You've lost everything, but the Kauravas were about to abuse Draupadi, the wife, and this judge, the grandpa of the place, jumped in and said, no, okay, it's enough. You've had enough revenge, and you've punished these people enough. He said, what's fair? They get banished with their wife to the forest for 14 years. You get the whole kingdom, and that's what happened. So the Pandavas had to wander around in the forest for 14 years. The last one had to be in disguise. More long stories involved with that. And then they were meant to be given a certain amount of land or a small kingdom to live. But the Kauravas decided to deny them even that. So they went to see their cousin, Krishna, and they said, look, we're not even asking for much. All we want is a little kingdom for ourselves to live in, and they won't even give it. And at the same time, Duryodhan went to Krishna for advice. Oh no, sorry. First Krishna said, well, you must fight for it then. He goes, you guys are great warriors. You can kick their butts, go and take back what's yours. And
at any point did they know that the game was rigged, that the dice was rigged?
well, you would think. You would think.
Okay.
But I think he was so blinded by gambling fever. Maybe that was the message. Like, this is what gambling is. It overtakes you. You lose your reason.
And the human condition. He was righteous in his dharma and still had a human flaw, a human flaw.
Yeah. And so war was unavoidable. So now, who is Krishna going to fight with? He was cousins to both of them. Both of them had claims on him. So they both end up arriving at Krishna's place together to ask for his support in the war. And first Duryodhan arrived first, so he had first right to ask Krishna. So Krishna said, okay. And Duryodhan said, Krishna, come and fight with us. You're our kinsman, you're really close to us, you sat at your table, and you should be with us. And he had every claim to Krishna as an ally. So Krishna said to Duryodhan, I tell you what, you can have either my entire army, all my weapons and resources, or you could have me alone, unarmed, and I won't raise a weapon in the battle. And Duryodhan, being material minded, took the whole army and all the equipment. Arjun, who was the representative of the Pandavas, was more than happy with just Krishna, unarmed and vowing not to fight in the battle. So that's how things lined up at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. The Pandavas were way outnumbered by the Kauravas, but they had Krishna as the charioteer of Arjun, and these 5 brothers were sons of gods.
Okay.
Mind you, the other side also had a son of a god with them. So they had immense power on both sides. And this is where the Gita opens. Now, the Gita is narrated to the blind king by a sage, Sanjay, who was given the gift of farsight. What do you call that? Farsight and remote vision. Remote. So he was able to narrate to King Dhritarashtra, the father of the Kauravas, everything that was going on the battlefield. You could even hear all the conversations. So he was able to hear all the conversation with between Krishna and Arjun. in the chariot. So he said at the beginning, all these hundreds of thousands of men are lined up on each side of the battlefield, just this immense plain where they've come to fight. And Arjuna asked Krishna to take his chariot out into the center of the field so he could observe the array of the enemy. And when he went there, he saw his uncles, he saw his cousins, he saw his teachers, and he just thought, what for? You know, I'm meant to kill his beloved grandfather figure was on the other side because of politics, even though he was super righteous, and that was Bhishma. And he lost heart completely. He slumped down in the chariot. He said, I can't do this. I won't fight. And that's where the Gita starts. That's the end of chapter 1. And chapter 2. Okay, you have any questions so far, or
Nope.
you want to say anything about any of that?
Nope, that's...
Is it pretty clear?
Yeah, it's very clear, and
Okay.
it fits in with the skeleton that I have. You're fleshing it out really quite nicely.
Okay. So the first chapter, in brief, is just looking at going out into the middle of the field and looking at the two armies, and then Arjun saying that I can't do it, basically, and I won't. And so it goes into the second discourse, which is Sankhya Yoga. Now, all these chapters in the Gita, they're different types of yoga, right? So, just to read off the second one is Sankhya Yoga, 3, the yoga of action, 4, the yoga of wisdom, 5, the yoga of the renunciation of action, 6, the yoga of meditation, 7, the yoga of wisdom and realization, 8, the yoga of imperishable Brahm, 9, the yoga of the kingly science and the kingly secret, 10, the yoga of divine glories, 11, the yoga of the vision of the cosmic form, 12, the yoga of devotion, 13, the yoga of distinction between the field and the knower of the field, the yoga of 14, the yoga of the division of the 3 gunas, 15, the yoga of the supreme spirit, 16, the yoga of the division between the divine and the demoniacal, 17, the yoga of the division of the threefold faith, 18, the yoga of liberation by renunciation. So you can see this is like such a comprehensive piece of information about all the different ways to approach yoga, which means approach unity. It's like all the different paths up the mountain.
Yes.
And this chapter 2, this Sankhya Yoga, really, I would say, is the most important chapter in the Gita. If you have to study just one chapter out of this whole book, it should be chapter 2. Everything that comes after is more or less talking about the principles that are laid down in this chapter.
Cool.
So, so here again, it begins with Arjun slumped in the chariot, and he says, "I will not fight." Krishna says, "Thou hast grieved for those that should not be grieved for, yet thou speakest words of wisdom. The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead." I love that one. Okay, so now Krishna gives Arjuna a not only a pep talk, but he outlines all that goes on in the human brain, basically. I'm just not sure how I should format this.
So give an example of what he's demonstrating about the human condition. Is there anything that you jumps out at you as an example?
Okay, well, just take him being slumped in the chariot with this task in front of him that he does not want to perform.
Yes.
Because of emotional issues.
Yes, he's despondent because he needs to, people that he loves and cares about and family are on different sides of a battle line.
Right. So all of that is because of his forgetfulness of the self. Like, he thinks that he's an individual, Arjun,
Yes.
with all these relations, with all these different names and forms. Whereas Krishna has to remind him, he goes, look, you are not an individual. So I am the essence of you. I am the essence of all these people. There's no way to either kill or give birth to anything. And this is the pared down truth that you need to imbibe right now, and know that you have to do your duty and stand up and fight. This is part of the thing.
So there's something bigger going on here, and you being able to reject the reality of what's happening, as opposed to embrace it and be who you are. It's virtually, this is the situation, whether you like it or not. This is where your family is and the people that you love on different sides of the same line, and that you don't have a choice. You are going. So if you don't have a choice, then you might as well do it powerfully. And this is circumstances that were set it up for you, so you actually have to accept what's happening around you and act accordingly. Is that the gist of what? Is that the importance? Is that the importance of what Krishna was saying?
Yeah, he seems to be concerned with dynamism. He says you cannot slump in your chariot and not fight, because you'll lose honor. And for those who have been honored, the loss of honor is like a hell. And you don't want that to happen. You want to. It's as if you've been handed a script to read for your part in the play, and you're not going to read it. So what does the audience think? They're not impressed. They're not going to be impressed, and the play is going to flop.
So it kind of points a little bit to, like, with honor sometimes can be confused with machismo. But it's not that. It's more of integrity. It's more of the honor who you are and honor the situation and act accordingly. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I wrote down just a few verses that I thought were important, and one of them says, he who takes the self to be the slayer, and he who thinks he is slain, neither of them knows. He slays not, nor is he slain.
Which for me points to that life is infinite and eternal, in spite of that we believe in death and endings, and that it's really a disappointing situation, as opposed to that. One way I like to speak it is that birth is a miracle and death is a miracle. And we see birth as a miracle, and we see death as the worst possible thing that can happen.
Yeah.
So is that what he's pointing to? Is life is infinite, eternal, and there's a oneness, and there's an energy, and there's a design, and
very much so. And it goes in the verse that comes just after that. It says, just as a man casts off worn-out clothes and puts on new ones, so also the embodied self casts off worn-out bodies and enters others that are new.
Yes.
So why be so attached to this body? This is what he's saying. You're attached to this body, you're attached to the body of your relations and your teachers and your friends, and so much so that you're ignoring what is yours to do, and you're renouncing for the wrong reasons.
And freedom, it just really gives you freedom.
Mm.
If you're not afraid of the end result, then you can act freely.
And here he talks about the self, the nature of the self, which doesn't mean some self off somewhere in space. Self means what's inside of you. It's like myself. The self is inside of you. And he describes it as weapons cut it not, fire burns it not, water wets it not, wind dries it not. So it is absolutely indestructible.
And it's beyond the senses. It's beyond the elements. It's
even as it permeates them. Yeah. So so that chapter 2 goes on talking about the nature of the self, the indestructible nature of the self.
Anything you want to say about the heart of, you might be doing it now, is Samkhya Yoga. Is there anything that you want to say as an overview to that?
Well, what do you understand Sankhya Yoga as?
Well, it's complicated. There's 25 different kinds of reality. There's the Prakriti and the Purusha comes together in a wholeness that comes down into the human intellect, which comes down into the ego, which comes down into the gunas, which comes down into the senses and the organs and all the places that you create your reality from through sensing. So it's virtually the way I look at it is kind of like at each level you're moving away from the purity of energy down to the senses of a human being, and then how you create your reality from those senses and from those elements. So it's a real interesting line from pure energy. A lot of people say, like, there is some confusion about Samkhya Yoga being, some people think it's non-dualistic and some people think it's dualistic. So that's a pretty big, difference. And also some people think that there's a circle missing on the very top, which is just source that comes down into the two energies. So, I've seen a lot of conflicting information about it, but it's just a really all-encompassing look at how we create our reality, or in Sanskrit, tattva?
Yeah, tattva.
Tattva.
Tattva means element, yeah.
And so there's 25.
Or tat means sat, actually, is sat.
How do I spell it? Tattva.
Tattva, that means element.
Okay, and then on all the things I've seen about Samkhya Yoga, they equate that to reality. Okay. Another difference. I mean, like, there's so much contradictory information around yoga, so it's just really to be able to hold all the core of what they're saying that they agree on is a huge body of work, let alone the differences, through the lineages through the years. So it's fascinating to be able to try and keep up with all that. So is there anything, is there anything specific about the Samkhya Yoga that you like to point out, or is that enough detail?
Very well done, Brian. I must say, because you have your five senses of action, tasting, smelling, tasting, smelling, hearing, seeing, and touching. And then you have, so that's 5, and then you have your 5 senses of one was 5 senses of action, 5 senses of knowledge, and then you have the inner and outer versions of these. So that makes 20, and then
25 altogether.
Yeah, and then you have the 4 divisions of the mind, the intellect, the manas, chit, buddhi, and ahankar. Man is the mind stuff, chit is the thought patterns, buddhi is the intellect, and ahankar is the ego.
The reason why I'm smiling is because you have to go to the Sanskrit to remember the English. See, that is just the opposite of anybody else I've ever met in my life. You have to go to the Sanskrit to remember what you're talking about in English. Okay, all right. So yeah, so it's a complicated system, and it's all encompassing. It covers all
Yeah,
the it covers all the bounds.
yeah,
And then he's speaking about the human condition of the elements of what goes on inside of a human being because of this is the setup. I get it.
right. And here he talks, but if thou wilt not fight in this righteous war, then having abandoned thine own duty and fame, thou shalt incur sin. People too will recount thy everlasting dishonor, and to one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death.
Okay, so they took integrity seriously.
They did. And which is sort of contradictory to I'm everywhere and everything. So why aren't you and the person slumped in the chariot as well?
Okay.
Anyway,
Well, the way I look at that is that
but Krishna always inspired towards action. His was a rowdy clan.
yes.
And really, and he even encouraged them to go to war in the beginning, and he didn't want them to kind of bargain for peace. He wanted them to fight. So that was Krishna.
Yeah, he started off with that. Yeah.
Krishna was a very rowdy guy, a bit of a rascal. In fact, one of the controversial things about the Gita is the Pandavas were losing the war, or there were certain battles going on that the Pandavas were losing, and Krishna showed them how to cheat to win. So he exhorted them to cheat and win the battle.
Wow.
And that was Krishna, right? The incarnation of Vishnu.
Yes.
So,
but it's interesting that he was involved in both sides. He gave them a choice. One got the army. They made the choice. They had first choice.
Yeah.
They chose what they did, and they didn't realize that. But also the side that he was on, that he was willing to actually bend the rules a little bit. As I guess all's fair in love and war.
Yeah. No, it was a really dirty war, and then afterwards there were revenge killings of the most horrible nature. And then, when Krishna dies at the end of the whole Mahabharata, he was like sitting under a tree, taking his leisure with his foot up in the air, and some hunter thought that his heel was the nose of a deer, and he shot him in the heel, and that's how Krishna died, and he went to heaven.
Wow.
Yeah. And then what happened as soon as he died, his entire clan had this drunken melee and slaughtered each other, completely slaughtered each other. So go figure that out.
What was the lesson? What was the lesson? Is that in the Bhagavad Gita?
No, it's not in the Bhagavad Gita.
It's
in the Mahabharata.
The greatest story.
Yeah. You have to read the denouement of this war in the Mahabharata, and it's shocking.
Okay.
Good story, but I mean, you can make a Rambo movie out of it. Really.
Well, yeah. Interesting.
So, anyway, if you read and study chapter 2, you really get the gist of the entire Gita. It really lays down all the principles.
Making the distinctions of the human condition, of what it is we need to keep our eye on when we're making our decisions, of who we are and how we're going to live our life.
Which other ones did I put down? 62, 63. Yeah, here's the heart of the Gita, is verse 62 in chapter 2. It goes like this. When a man thinks of the objects, attachment to them arises. From attachment, desire is born. From desire, anger arises. From anger comes delusion. From delusion, the loss of memory. From loss of memory, the destruction of discrimination. From the destruction of discrimination, he perishes. So it's talking about what happens when attachment arises. Attachment.
The destruction of the... What's the last one? Discrimination?
The destruction of the discrimination.
Help me with the interpretation of that.
The discrimination, it just means the ability to determine what's what.
So you're completely lost, is what it's saying. You're not making any choices that are good for you.
It's like once you get down the roller coaster of attachment, you can't stop till you hit the bottom.
Okay.
And this outlines the stages.
That slope. Okay.
But the self-controlled man, moving amongst objects with the senses under restraint and free from attraction and repulsion, attains to peace.
Yes.
So
speak about the attraction and repulsion. So somebody that is beyond attraction and repulsion, just talk about that a little bit.
okay, so attraction and repulsion in Sanskrit is called rag and dvesh. The paramount quality that a yogi is said to attain is called vairagya. That means treating attraction as if it's an enemy, knowing that reaping the results or getting the object of attraction is not going to give you satisfaction. It's just going to lead to further desire.
And the falseness of your desires.
Yeah.
That they're empty is really what it's pointing to.
Yeah, that fulfilling a desire does not give you satisfaction. It just leads you to another desire.
Generally to more desire and a bigger hole that you need to fill.
Yes.
And then on the same side, so flipping it in regards to repulsion, is that if there's things that you're repulsed by in life, there's also a falsehood in that. And so I guess being neutral to what it is that you're repulsed by, allowing it to be, you don't need to play with it or take it home, but just being neutral to the things that you're repulsed by.
Yeah, non-attached.
Yeah.
Non-attached to your perception of what you're perceiving.
Yes.
So you can still enjoy, you can still be repulsed, but you're not attached to the results of what your enjoyment is going to be or your repulsion.
Sure.
So that is easy to say.
Yes.
But to actually achieve it is something different because we're taking in all this information through the senses, like we outlined before, what a human being is.
Yes.
You know, and like it starts with the most refined aspect of the human being is the ego. It's the sense of I. It precedes your name even. It precedes your form. It's like I know that I exist,
yes.
and I am a body and a name and a form and all these senses. But that I actually doesn't have any form at all. Show me the form of an eye. Show me your eye. You know,
yes.
there is no form to it.
It's
abstract.
a creation. Yes.
Yeah,
it's
your
illusion.
subtle-most manifestation of you.
Yes.
And
what was the time periods called?
the yugas.
The yuga. So in this yuga, where we are, you know, whatever percentage of what our perception of self could be, and our society is completely focused on our desires. Everything around us is about, you know, all of the television, everything people are saying to you, how they live their lives, how they're making their choices, is completely based on their desires and repulsions. So as for like the audience that's listening to this is everyday yoga people that are looking at, you know, how can we apply this in our life, and being able to, like, I'll take a cut at it and then maybe you can add something to it, is just being, you know, being conscious to your desires. Like all of us have at some level that you know, that time you wanted to have your cake and eat it too, is that there's something empty about your desires, and can be something empty about your desires, and whatever sense that you have of that is really worth looking at and being able to err on the side of not indulging in it. If you have a choice, try to indulge less in what your desires are and be conscious to what's driving you and what those forces are. And the same thing with your repulsions, the things that are really making you ill, or that you really find so unpleasant that it's affecting your day, that you once again err on the side of letting go of that and letting be and seeing it for what it is. Is that, in trying to make it, you know, relevant in everybody's life. Is there anything else that you would, you know, can add to that, or what do you think?
Yeah, you know, it's a really difficult topic because nobody really wants to renounce anything. You know, I certainly don't. And I always sort of struggled with it. You know, like, so I would say that there's an attitude I don't think I would have accepted anyone telling me to be even-minded towards things, that you don't like, and are repulsed by, and don't really go after the things that you like because they're going to make you unhappy. And then I would never have listened to any of that. But I think that through meditation, you get experiences that are not attached to any object. You get a kind of happiness which comes without any reason, without any object bringing it.
It's inherent.
So it's inherent.
If you look for it, it's inherent.
Yeah. So if you have the direct experience of that meditation, of that we call it samadhi, which is like the vision of oneness, or feeling one with everything. It's an actual feeling, it's a tangible, physical
Absolutely.
feeling that you get when your kundalini rises enough.
Yes.
And
I just simply call it
nervous.
beingness, is the words that I put to it.
Yeah.
But yes, keep going.
So this, to me, makes it possible to stop chasing after objects and materiality, because I've had the direct experience of fulfillment simply with my own energy.
Yes.
And that comes from the practice of yoga. And as we've seen, there's all these different yogas. There's 18 yogas in the Bhagavad Gita. There's more yogas, and so it's like every single path leads up to the top of the mountain, whichever way you take it, and they all have their value, or they're all equally horrible.
Yes. Beautiful distinction, actually, coming to that it's inherent. There's nothing that you need to do. And letting go of these outside desires and the forces that have you focused on them, because it focuses as a way from what's inherent in what you are. Beautiful. So,
okay, so that, and here he also talks about that. He says, in that peace, all pains are destroyed, for the intellect of the tranquil-minded soon becomes steady. So that's why people renounce, you hear about people in India renouncing things for their whole life. They throw away all their stuff, take just a few rags or cloth and wander around and meditate, and that's it. Because they're able to sit steadily in that tranquil-minded place, and they don't need any of these objects.
Yes.
But it gets distorted and it gets abused. So if you're renouncing, if you think, I need tranquility and steady-mindedness, let me throw away my car and my cat and my doormat and everything. That's not it, because you might be sitting inside saying, I want my car back, I want my cat back.
That's not going to work if you have to get up the next day to go to work. And you want to,
Yeah, so none of this should be just taken on the word level. It actually all needs to be experienced for you to really grasp it.
And be able to apply it seamlessly in your life now. Because you could renounce today. I mean, if you're living a life in society and you have a car and a job and all the entrapments of life, and you could renounce today and go live under a bridge. And like in India, people go live under a bridge, and that's a legitimate life goal, to be able to do that, and people will feed you and be able to contribute to your desired path, where in the Western world that's very less likely. That's not legitimate, and you're actually a bum who lives under a bridge, and sorry for you. Bad choices. As opposed to being legitimate, renouncing is a huge... There's so many things in life that I've rejected because I just didn't find it. I renounced a lot of what I was told about how society works and how you're supposed to be. And I have not, I've not given up really in renouncing everything. I've given up very, very little in comparison. So you can do it. I mean, there's people that have done it, have just, gone to India or, wherever they've gone, to a cave or and renounced everything. It is possible, but I didn't choose that path.
Well, the Gita, the last chapter of the Gita. Do you remember what
It's renouncement, yes. And
the
something
yoga
else.
of liberation by renunciation.
There we go.
Okay, so if you are able to renounce your own sense of individuality, that's all you ever have to renounce. Just to say, look, it's never Brian. It's never me, Brian.
Yes.
It's always Krishna who's walking around as Brian.
Yes.
Always. And that's like the highest memory that you could have. That you are Godhead. And the goal of all this, supposedly, is the cessation of rebirth. Like merging back into the Godhead where you are fully God.
Yes.
Whatever that means.
Made whole.
Made
Realized.
whole. Yes.
Actualized.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Liberated from all sense of birth and death.
And giving up identity and personality and the story of everything that's going on around me.
It's the path of human evolution. So even though this is Kali Yuga, you and I could have this conversation and know that we are on that path.
Yes.
As you know, we're doing as good as we do, but we are
at the worst of times.
We're aiming in that direction.
Yes.
You know, and we understand what is meant by that.
Yes.
So how is that? How is it Kali Yuga? I'm not a gangster. I'm not and neither are you. You know, we're good people. We're righteous people. So it's maybe it's Kali Yuga, but it's not Kali Yuga in my head.
Yeah.
You know, so
I see that for the greater, for society, for the greater, and I live in this society, and as much as I dislike much of it, I'm still participate and do my part in it, and when it changes, it's going to affect me. Yeah. So I see it as societal changes, and that's what's obviously, when I take a look around, it's kind of crumbling a little bit of how we've known things have been done, and as far as I'm concerned, not a moment too soon. No. Society needs to change. The heart of that for me is the service to self, is what's driving our society, and there's virtually no focus on the whole. And speaking to each other as the whole, and interacting, making decisions based on what's good for the whole, which brings me appropriately back to Gandhi, who said there's enough for everybody's need, but there's not enough for everybody's greed. Yeah. Which is definitely identity and personality driven, and all the fears of what people, at the heart of everybody is that they feel that they're not good enough, and that they, instead of dealing with that directly and seeing the Maya or the lie in that, they are out in the world trying to acquire all of this stuff to cover it up, to go, yeah, I'm good enough, and being able to show it off to other people in a surface kind of way of, I have status, and now you can obviously see that I am good enough because look at all the people that I'm better than. So, for example, that's what I think is being brought into question, and not a moment too soon.
And we've been talking about the tipping point of consciousness for past few years.
No, yeah, 30. I've been waiting for a tipping point.
But honestly, it just seems like so many more people are switched on these days.
True.
And I'm really hopeful. I just feel like personally my own awareness and perception is becoming so powerful.
Yes.
that my field is reflecting it. The material field that I move in is reflecting it.
Yes.
And a life of very great ease has come about, along with challenging situations that push me to communicate and spread the knowledge that's in me everywhere.
Yes.
And I'm finding receptive ears for it
now.
So we're all sort of rising together like cream to the top of the milk.
All ships rise.
Yes.
And the other thing I was just talking about earlier today is that there seems to be things that I hadn't really observed in 20 or 30 years of looking. All of a sudden, and I'm not even, working in that area. It's not like I've been mining certain things transformationally for a while, but there's these veils that are dropping in areas that I'm not even working in. All of a sudden, something that's been would have been useful for 20 or 30 years for me to notice. And if I was working on that, I wouldn't be surprised I'm getting these insights in these areas. But in these times, I'm getting all of these insights that I'm not even working over there. All of a sudden, there's like, da-da! I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's really useful. So there seems to be a raising of consciousness, which isn't really, like all the time when I've raised my consciousness, it's been in because of intent. I've noticed something, I've went after it, and then I got insights because of that. Now I'm getting insights that are just seemingly random, which is and powerful, and there's work to do. There's things to do to be able to integrate these insights into my life. Because if I get an insight, I've made a deal with myself, like whatever I see, I'm going to try and implement into my life. That's my deal with me. So, and that I've been, and also my other deal with me is be constantly working, be on the learning edge of my life, to be noticing fears, and then being able to see the lie in those fears, and being able to take those fears out of my life, living more from truth and abundance and belief in myself and my fellow man. So those are my agreements with myself. But at this time is a very interesting time because I've never had that before. I've never had so many insights that are just unrelated to my everyday practice. So just speaking to that, there's more people listening. There seems to be that once again there's a quickening of energy and people's insights and ability to want to work on themselves and be more part of these conversations. So having said all that, if chapter 2, once you're done with chapter 2, is we're getting close to an ending of our time. So finish up chapter 2 of the Samkhya Yoga, and then anything else that you want to do just to sum up the other 16 chapters would suffice. Sorry for...
Okay, I'll just read the last 2 verses of chapter 2. I mean, we just really, there's 72 verses in chapter 2. We talked about 5 of them.
Yes.
So there's a lot more information in there regarding the workings of the mind, where it gets caught up, and how to liberate it. And he sums up by saying, the man attains peace who, abandoning all desires, moves about without longing, without the sense of mine, and without egoism.
Beautiful.
So that's something to practice.
Yes.
You know, like what does it actually mean, abandon all desires, right? Just let them come and let them go. You know, if suppose you want to climb a mountain, send your mind to the top of the mountain. Or if
there's ways that things need to be, the shoulds of the world, you know, giving those up and going. A man said the other day at one of our events here, he said, I have no resistance to life. I have no resistances. And I went, geez, that is really, he's really an interesting guy. I believe him that he virtually has very little, if any, resistance to life. And I have lots of resistances to life. And being able to go, no, being able to let them, you know, unfold as they do. And I still have my intentions. I'm still trying to create the things I'm trying to create. But whatever occurs is supposed to occur, and be able to reassess my situation of how well I was able to create what I wanted to create, but still not having any resistances to life, I see as a part of that. And it's also a practice that I've been working on. So that's kind of what came up for me.
That kind of lack of resistance to life is really putting your attention on God. That I mean is another way to look at it.
Yes.
Instead of weighing the benefits and faults of whatever path that you're engaged in, or whatever project you're engaged in.
The folly of mankind.
You're not doing that. You're thinking, oh, it's all God everywhere. Whatever happens, I'm not attached.
Yes.
But I mean, the nuances and the trickiness of dealing with that type of philosophy is just a life's work, a lifetime's practice.
It is.
But by learning some of these Gita verses, you'll be able to physically practice these mental exercises that are meant to free your mind, liberate your mind. And the last verse in chapter 2 says, this is the seat of Brahm, the eternal state. That means that which is infinite, incomprehensible,
godly state.
Indescribable, attaining to this, none is deluded. Being established therein, even at the end of life, one attains to oneness with Brahm. So you get liberated from birth and death. is the ultimate goal of training your perception in this way. And that's basically chapter 2. We left out a lot, but it doesn't matter. There's one verse. This is my favorite verse in the whole Gita, and it's chapter 3 talks about action. Arjun says, "Look, you've just expounded all this knowledge to me. It sounds like the yoga of knowledge is better than the yoga of action. Why are you making me act like this? Why are you making me do this action?" So then Krishna goes into the whole thing about how you think you're acting. It's not you acting, it's me acting. Get it through your head.
It's the spirit in everything.
And yes,
that is acting out as opposed to your identity or personality.
But Arjuna is so human, he needs to hear 18 chapters of it. It's pretty much saying the same thing over and over again.
Okay.
And then in chapter 11 he says, yeah, but Krishna, this is all very good and I understand, and I'll fight and all that, but show me your cosmic form. Show me your true self. And Krishna said, well, really? You want to? Okay, here's the blue pill. Arjuna sees the cosmic form. He freaks out because it's way too much for him to handle in his nerve. He had to be given a special something by Krishna. He called it the eye of the divine eye or something, some jewel. And so as long as he had that, he could tolerate it. Otherwise, he would have just exploded or something. So
okay,
so this is that's one of the high points of the Gita as well. And I just wanted to read this.
So this is in the 3rd chapter, and it's your favorite verse in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, it's in the 4th chapter.
4th chapter.
Actually. See, I'm looking at the Sanskrit numbers for which verses. I could look at the English one.
Well, there's always that.
Okay, this says, Tyaktva karma phala sangam nitya tripto nirashrayah karmanya pravrittopi naiva kinchitta karoti saha. Having abandoned attachment to the fruits of actions, ever content, depending on nothing, he does not do anything, though engaged in activity.
Okay, so you're going to have to read that again.
Okay, so tyaktva means abandon, it means give up. Karma pal, the fruit of karma. Sangam is attachment to the fruit of the action. Karma. Nitya tripto, always content. Nirashriyaha, independent, not dependent on anything. Karmanya bhi pravrittopi means even while engaged in action, naiva kinchit karoti saha, you feel as if you're doing nothing. So this is how I navigate my way through the world.
Yes.
I do that which feels like I'm doing nothing, or I try to. And I find that these are the most successful actions, they're the most fluid actions, when you're not attached to the result of your action.
Yes.
You say the result of your action might be good, it might be bad, but I'm free. I'm just doing it selflessly.
Yes.
Or rather, I'm doing it with the understanding that God is doing it, that Krishna is doing it, that the Supreme Being is doing it. The Supreme Being, whose name is Steve, as we all know.
I've often struggled with this information. For a lot of years, I actually struggled with that kind of line about not being the doer, I think, is what it comes down to, and that because nothing happens in a vacuum. So it wasn't, I've had to come to terms with this in that it isn't about your personality or identity or your strategy or your plan or your understanding of how everything works in building a path through it. It's really more of an intuitive experience of being in the moment, and something glows for you and you move that way because it glows for you. And when you're in that moment and it's glowing for you, that's another step in a direction, and maybe you change your direction because something's glowing for you over there. It's kind of that's the way I speak about it. Does that work for you? How would you describe that then? Like
well, the way I understood what you just said is like something is glowing for you, so
like
you
a choice. You're making a choice based on,
Yeah.
like, it's not desires and it's not based on plans and it's not
Right.
based on my identity, but
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, I feel like I need to go this way.
Yeah.
This is what I feel like I need to do. It's
Yeah.
deeper. It's not in your head.
Yeah.
It's kind of an all-knowing, like if you allowed yourself, some people call it intuition.
Yes.
But it's really just a kind of loose feeling of, I'm not doing any justice to it, but I'm doing my best to try to describe it. The impulse to actually act isn't something that rises to your head and that you think out and strategize and make a plan about and what how most people create their life. It really is that is glowing for me. I think I need to move in that way. And you might move in another way. You might do zigzags for your entire life and you might go in a completely straight line. Neither are important.
Yeah,
it's just really
yeah.
that you're following what's
Yeah.
glowing for you in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm using glowing as,
Right.
to not use a bunch of words.
It's like your path is illuminated. Look, it goes
Yes.
this way.
Yes.
And that's exactly what this is saying, because it's saying do that which feels like you're doing nothing. You are doing nothing. You're staying on the path.
Yeah. I gotta
That
do
you
something.
see. You're not veering off the path to bushwhack.
Yes.
For no reason.
Yeah.
When the perfectly well lighted path is right in front of you.
Yes.
So it's taking the course of least resistance, perhaps, is like the Taoist kind of sense of being like water,
Yes.
flowing around the obstacles. Water never worries; it just flows.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I navigate as well. I identify with this sense of oneness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try not to lose it.
Yes.
I try and do everything that doesn't make me forget and get angry or upset or, one of those other qualities that we don't particularly care for.
Exactly.
So to do that, this detachment from the result of the action is recommended.
Yes.
And
that took me a long time, thank you. It took me a long time to actually work out what those words meant.
Yeah.
Because it was rather confusing how people talk. Nobody pulled it out like this. I had to pull it out like this to actually be able to get my hands on it. So, and that took a couple decades to be able to work that out, because there was nobody discussed it that way. When people say, I'm not the doer or you're not the doer, I was like, okay, you've really stumped me now. And I made it more complicated than it actually was, because it was easier. It was an easier understanding than I originally thought. Okay.
Well, the results of that type of inquiry can take a while. I mean, it took me a couple decades, and I was surrounded by people talking about that stuff. But
okay, I don't feel so bad anymore. Okay, good. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Right.
But that's why the constant and long-term meditation practices is recommended, because you have to steady the mind to be able to accept these states that are waiting for you.
Yes, which is virtually being and which is virtually self, and it's always happening, and that it's an ability to be able to stop all these programs from running, to actually look to see what you're experiencing. And we do call it the subtle body. So it points to the fact that it's subtle. So that you're looking to the subtleties of who you are, and there's no thought or action or plan or pictures of what that needs to be. It is something, and it's up to us to be able to look inside and allow it to be, and just feel it and see it for what it is. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Brian.
And this very cursory look at the Bhagavad Gita, we hope people are able to enjoy the stories. And if anybody's interested in more workshops and more material, we'll be very happy to put something together for them. Thank you very much, Steve.
Pleasure,
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.